Good morning. Happy to have you with us. I'm Neil Cavuto in for Maria Bartiromo. Some breaking news out of Italy. A major bridge collapse there. At least 10 have been killed. And as Cheryl Casone reported a little while ago, there were a lot of structures, buildings, and what have you underneath that bridge. So still no update on people who could be missing and God knows what else. Also keeping track of what could have been a pretty bad terror attack in London. Didn't end that way, though. A car crashed into a barrier near Parliament. So far, no reports of injuries, but woulda, shoulda, coulda, and the markets, well, a nonplus reaction to all of that. Meanwhile, a rebound in the Turkish lira might have been a reason for that. Futures pointing higher, as well as the European markets and the Asian markets, just on the belief that maybe the worst is over for Turkey. That might be a bit of a leap here, but we shall see. We've got Fox contributor Katherine Timpf joining me, Wall Street Journal global economics editor John Hilsenrath, and CFRA investment strategist Lindsey. In the meantime, I do want to look at this tariff thing from both sides here. Businesses that benefit, businesses that do not. Adam Shapiro is live in Marsa, Missouri, with the former first. Adam.
And Neil, we are at the Magnitude 7 aluminum plant. This plant was shut down for 2 years. Magnitude 7 bought it, and they, because of the tariffs, have been able to bring 375 people back to work. They're looking for another 150. And when they get all of this up and running, perhaps in the next year, it could be back at full employment, almost 900 people. Take a look at what they do here, the video we shot, where they make aluminum. They're only at 20% roughly capacity right now, and it's the tariffs, the CEO, Bob Fresco, will tell you, that made the difference. It's only in June that they started to ramp up production. First shipment of aluminum in 2 years went out of this plant just 3 weeks ago. Here's what Mr. Fresco told me about the importance of the tariffs on aluminum.
It also gives this plant a viable history. If we have tariffs, we're going to be here operating. Whether that's 2 years, 4 years, it gives us that certainty.
So, Neil, as we talk about how the 375 people have come back to work here, these are jobs that pay anywhere from $20 to $30 an hour. I spoke to one man. He worked 15 years at this plant with the old company when it went bankrupt. He was out of work for 2 years. He's come back to work, and clearly for Kevin Tucker, this is a positive. Here's what he told me.
It's a big plus. You know, China floods the market with metal. The tariffs will help stop that, and that's what we need. We need to get more aluminum industry and steel industry back up in the United States. Get the business back here so it can be bought here instead of coming from overseas.
So, Neil, clearly the people here very happy with the tariffs because this plant alone could have an impact on the local economy of more than $300 million. But the tariff story has another side. We're going to be heading up the road to another factory where about 100 people have been laid off because of tariffs. That is Mid-Continent Nail. We're going to talk to those people. But as I talk about this, I want to show you something. Just the process of making aluminum. As we zoom into this pot right here, they're making aluminum there. There are 174 of these just on this one line, 2,000 degrees. That's what's going on there. This did not take place until June. And the people here, as business heats up, they are thrilled. Neil, back to you.
All right, Adam, thank you very, very much. Adam Shapiro. Let's talk to California Congressman Darrell Issa about the trade stuff, everything that's going on in politics, you name it. Congressman, it's always good to have you. Thank you for taking the time.
Neil, thanks for having me on. And if I can play off of what you just teed up, I think for the American people, that it's hard to understand that you can have both gaining and losing jobs unless you understand that the market distortion, the fact is you couldn't compete against aluminum being dumped into our country below its fair price, which is what the study found that led to that tariff. And at the same time realize that a nail production or some other industry might have built its production around low-cost, below-cost steel. But that's for real what we're dealing with. And so there's going to be market distortions. The goal, though, is to have other countries sell their products not by dumping them and America competing fairly.
But that might not be the result, right? I mean, when we see tariffs imposed on an industry in response to tariffs imposed on an industry and back and forth and the tit for tat, it gets out of control, right? All of a sudden, to save aluminum or steel, we have adversely impacted scores of other businesses. So how can that be a net good?
Well, Neil, all wars end. The question isn't war.
Well, we've been waiting for this one to end.
Well,
right?
this has been pretty short so far, but the fact is that war ends in peace. The question is, what are peace? In the case of trade, it's will we have a real reform to a distorted system, including the WTO system? Will we, in fact, for example, where the president said, look, I'll drop my 2.5% historic tariff on cars if Europe will drop its 10%. On our vehicles. You know, American-made Toyotas made in Kentucky see a 10% tariff trying to sell into Europe. Well, a BMW made in Europe comes in at 2.5%.
But Congressman,
Where's
we're
the
hardly
fairness?
saints, right? I mean, when it comes to like trucks and all, and we impose 20% tariffs on those. So who are we to judge?
I think there's a good example where for a long time we propped up the pickup truck industry, and people start asking why. Why did we do it? Yes, there are historic distortions. In general, though, the United States has the lowest tariffs of any major power in the world, and all we're really trying to do, I believe the president's trying to do, is to get past two things: below market dumping and trade barriers that are usually tariffs, but in the case of the Europeans, sometimes it's simply prohibitions. They won't buy our meat, they won't buy our GMO, quote, corn and soybeans. Those are problems that are part of the peace talks that I want to get to. I've voted for every single free trade agreement since I've been in Congress. I actually spoke on behalf of NAFTA with Mexico, on behalf of the Chamber in San Diego. I'm a free trader, but now that we're in this battle, it's got to be a battle that ends in a fair peace agreement. And the question is, how do we get to it as quickly as possible?
Congressman, it's Lindsey here. Just wondering,
Yes.
How long are you willing to let that battle go on for? Because with the steel and aluminum tariffs, you're seeing a lot of companies really see that they're being impacted by this. They're going to have to raise prices on a lot of their products, and the American consumer is going to be the one that's going to have to pay for that. We haven't even really felt the impact on the tariffs coming out of China just yet. So what is the timeline? What is the game plan here?
Well, one of the important things for the consumer to know and for the manufacturer to do is if the product is not available in the U.S., either because of demand or because of the particular type, they've got to apply for and get these exemptions that allow them not to pay the tariffs. In the meantime, we have free trade partners such as Bahrain and the Gulf that are actually gearing up to supply us with aluminum, and that'll come in duty-free if the negotiations go the way they're supposed to. There's no question at all that if you're going to have a trade war, full employment, this kind of period is a time to have them, but it also should be short, and it should lead to the kinds of changes that I think are in the long run good for the United States. And that's certainly what one congressman is working toward.
Congressman, you say that war leads to peace. War also creates casualties. What do you say to American farmers right now who are among the casualties that have been hit by the trade battles that we've got with other countries?
Well, first of all, a casualty would mean you're dead, and the agricultural business in the United States is good. The president has talked about and asked for the ability to provide some aid for specific disruptions that might occur, but so far there is full sale of all the crops. Again, remember, when I campaigned as a private citizen for NAFTA, one of the things that was included under President Clinton in the NAFTA reduction was, in fact, monies for market disruption to help people that are disrupted. Look, there's no question at all that we have a long history of exporting our manufacturing jobs, in some cases, to countries that distort their markets, such as China. Unwinding that has some pain. I think the important thing is we are still going to be the country that feeds the world. Our farmers are going to, in the long run, do just fine. If there's short-term disruption, there are a number of ways to fix it. Some of it is, in fact, to take some of that tariff money and make it available where farmers can specifically show that they've been adversely impacted. But let me just do one thing as an old economics student. You know, we continue for years to claim we were having gains in productivity, But the way the productivity calculation works is you take the total number of people working and the total GDP, and you say, here's how much more efficient we are with less people. But if you've outsourced the source material, so you're only touching the finished product, you actually create a distortion. So real productivity is when Americans produce most efficiently as much as they can. For decades now, we've been taking copper, mining it in Nevada, and exporting it to China along with coal so they could smelt it. There's no logical reason for an energy exporter and a mineral-rich country like the United States not to make that value added, meaning that copper turns into wire, turns into products. So getting back to having those kinds of industries for all of us who live off of it is critical. You know, when I went to college, they taught me there are only 3 things that create wealth in America: mining, manufacturing, and agriculture. And those principles are still true. The rest of us make our living off of that.
I respect the heck out of you, but when I went to college, they said that trade wars were not a good idea, and they said that sometimes that cause recessions and depressions. And they said responding tit for tat. Well, no, I'm just saying they're responding tit for tat and tariffs on top of tariffs to somehow stabilize a world trading environment that might be more in your favor. It sounds like you're just playing with grenades here.
You know, there's no question at all that there's both risk and reward. You know, one of the challenges in any peace talks is you've got to give the other side a pathway to a win on their side, a pathway to something where they can say this is fair. In the case of the Europeans, for example, on automobiles, it's pretty easy. Drop their tariff with the United States to 2.5%, or both of us drop it to zero.
Congressman, we're not playing fair. We're not playing fair. We're making a big deal, for example, when it comes to the Canadians, about 20% tariffs that they impose on dairy goods, forgetting the fact that that's about the only area where they sort of abuse the privilege. When you look at stats that come to us from the World Trade Organization on the average fees imposed on goods and services on other countries, ours averages at about 5%, Canada at about 6%. So we're making a big deal out of milk, and we're getting cream, no pun intended.
Neil, you're right about one thing. The solutions for free trade restoration, full free trade restoration with Canada, are easier than most of the rest of the world.
But we want the Canadians with the Chinese, sir. I mean, that's where we're losing the focus here.
Neil, I've never lumped the Canadians, where we have a good trading partner with a few small changes, or Mexico, where in general we have a fair trading partner.
But we have done that, Congressman. We have done that. What we're doing now is we're already telling the Canadians we'll sooner deal and talk to Mexico to hammering out a bilateral accord, our own little mini separate NAFTA with the Mexicans, than the Canadians, who've been our friends for a long, long time.
Look, both of these countries have increased their trade with us, bilateral trade with us, over the period of NAFTA. And getting those changes in place is the highest priority. If I were looking at our trade representative, there's no question at all. The shortest path to real solution is Canada and Mexico.
Congressman, you are a very successful businessman. You're the richest congressman. So you didn't get that way.
That's a low bar, though, Neil,
well,
really.
Whatever. You're no piker, right? So my only point in saying this is saying you know about business. You know the business world works. And something tells me you cannot remotely support this craziness.
Neil, I can support that small changes. For example, on my border with Mexico, they allow raw sewage to pour into the Tijuana River in violation of their agreement with us, and they haven't been willing to upgrade just their sewer system so it doesn't pollute the beaches of San Diego. Now, that's not a lot to ask for in a free trade agreement, is that they honor simple environmental things. So there are low-hanging fruit things that we could do with Mexico to make this work. It's important that we do it. Obviously, I want to get to the peace talks as fast as possible with all of the countries that want peace.
Congressman, you say that you campaigned for NAFTA as a private businessman. The president says it was a terrible deal, terribly negotiated. Did you make a mistake getting behind NAFTA?
I think the two unforeseen things. One, that they didn't live up to their environmental promises. That's a big deal. Right. The second was we didn't expect to have Chinese goods effectively transshipped through Mexico. If those two things can be fixed, I believe the Trump administration can get to a deal with Mexico.
All right. Congressman Issa, it's always a pleasure, sir. Thank you for taking the time.
Thanks, Neil.
Darrell Issa. All right, Home Depot could be a home run for the markets. Way beyond Home Depot. We'll explore and explain after this.
We like to party. You better shop around. Oh yeah, you better shop around. Shop around. There's some things that I want.
You know what I noticed about this show? A lot of music, and it's great. I think we should go toward Gregorian chants myself, or opera. An idea? No?
How about a German polka?
Yeah, I would, but it's always something different. It's nice. All right, so a couple hours from now, opera mixed with Gregorian chants, I promise. All right, in the meantime, Home Depot, first out the retail gate with numbers that surprise on the upside. Nicole Petallides on all the details there. And Nicole.
Hey, good morning, Neil. I'll watch for that on Cavuto Coast to Coast today. So we are seeing futures this morning to the upside to the tune of about 72 points. This after we've seen selling over the last several days. Earnings have been pretty stellar, 24.7% growth year over year when we expected just over 20%. So they continue to be good. And I got some good news for you here this morning on Home Depot and Tapestry, which is the parent of Coach, Kate Spade, and Stuart Weitzman. So let's start off with Home Depot. That's a Dow component. It's up 2.5%. Same store sales beat, raised the guidance, profit soars. And this is much like what we saw in the last quarter. You know, people were comparing Lowe's to Home Depot, but it was Home Depot that really showed it could surpass all the estimates in its own way. And Lowe's didn't do exactly that. So there really was a disparity between its big competitor. Then let's get to Tapestry. Of course, we had the untimely death of Kate Spade herself and an apparent suicide on June 5th. And you know what happened? Everybody started buying the Kate Spade bags, and it ended up being that the Kate Spade sales were better than expected. They only dropped 3%, and that's why you saw Kate Spade helped Tapestry overall. And so that is the good news there. And then big picture, what the traders are looking for, of course, they're keeping Turkey in mind. Slower numbers for the week. We're expecting, obviously, not as much trading for the summer. And we'll watch for U.S. hearings, trade talks, and the FOMC minutes next week. Back to you.
All right, Nicole, thank you very, very much. We're trying to get some more details on this Italian bridge collapse that has claimed at least 10 lives. It could be many, many more here, because we are told also from the Italian press that many are still missing. There are a number of buildings, homes, cars, trucks that were beneath that when all of this happened. We'll keep you posted on that. More after this. All right, more on that bridge collapse in Italy. Cheryl Casone with that. Hey, Cheryl.
Hey, we're getting some more pictures, more information, Neil. A government source now tells an Italian news agency the death toll now stands at 11, and we're getting this video just in of the bridge. This is what Italy's transport minister is calling an enormous tragedy in Genoa, Italy. This is the northern part of the country where this happened. You're looking at this new video that's just in. It shows the moment, though, that a 650-foot part of the Morandi Bridge fell, crushing vehicles and some structures below. A firefighter reportedly says about 20 vehicles were also involved in this disaster. The bridge, which was built in 1967, connects Italy to France. The collapse happened just before a major Italian holiday, which is tomorrow. I want to show you this picture of what the bridge looked like before the collapse, and then you can see on to the right of your screen the devastation after. We continue to follow this story. We'll bring you all the latest information as it becomes available to us in our newsroom here. Well, another breaking news story out of London. A man is under arrest this morning for crashing his car into security barriers outside the British Parliament in London this morning. He is described only as being in his late 20s. He is in custody on suspicion of terrorism. No weapons were found in the car. Scotland Yard says pedestrians and cyclists were hit, but police do not believe any of the injuries are life-threatening.
2 people have been taken to hospital. 1 man has already been discharged, and 1 woman remains in hospital being treated for serious but thankfully non-life-threatening injuries. Given that this appears to be a deliberate act, the method, and this being an iconic site, we are treating it as a terrorist incident, and the investigation is being led by officers from the Counter-Terrorism Command.
Well, streets in the surrounding area still blocked off. The nearby Westminster Underground station is still closed at this hour. Again, coming up on rush hour in London. President Trump tweeted a short time ago about it. Another terrorist attack in London. These animals are crazy and must be dealt with through toughness and strength. Those are the two big stories we're following out of Europe this morning, Neil. Then we're looking at this, more of a global story. Check out the price of Bitcoin. It's trading sharply lower this morning, just above 6,000 right now, but that's down 200. At one point, digital currency was below $6,000 for the first time since June. Nearly every other cryptocurrency is also under pressure this morning. Digital currencies rallied last month on hopes that new investors would be attracted to a Bitcoin-backed ETF, but the SEC has postponed a decision on the fund. Morgan Stanley, Goldman Sachs, many others talk a lot about Bitcoin and getting into it, but it's not 20,000 anymore, Neil.
Man, oh man, not for the faint of heart. Thank you, Cheryl, very, very much. John, not remotely for the faint of heart.
No, I've always felt that the technology behind Bitcoin, blockchain technology, is real and has a place in the financial system in the future. But the currency itself, I've never seen it, becoming a currency that people use. When people start shopping on Amazon with Bitcoin, I'll believe it's real. Until then, I think the price keeps going down.
I mean, it was 8,000 last month. Now we're back down to 6,000. It's not.
Where did it peak? Around 19?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah. It's surreal. It's surreal. All right, we come back. Tesla and now report that Elon Musk, forget about all those reports you've heard about him talking to the Saudis and the Saudi Sovereign Fund. He's talking to Goldman Sachs and a host of other honchos on that move to go private that now has a lot of people screaming. We'll explore after this. Sometimes just when I'm waiting for music, they surprise me here. No, Neil, we're not going to use any musicals in here. You're messing with me. Welcome, everybody. Good to have you. I'm Neil Cavuto in for my friend Maria Bartiromo, who's on vacation. The lira is rebounding today right now, and that has provided enough of a sap to the markets here just toward relief that President Erdogan buys another day to stave off those who have been saying enough already. Well, today is enough. In our own futures markets in Europe and Asia, largely advances across the board. Now, keep in mind, Japan is sort of the tricky wicket in all of this because of its exposure to this very country. We'll get into that in a bit. Meanwhile, what did the Saudis promise and when did they promise it? And did potentially Elon Musk overstate the case? With us now is Stefanie Miller, High Capital Market Senior Analyst, on this whole back and forth as Tesla moves to go private. I wonder what he said that would trigger regulators' attention in this country, just to put it in perspective. It started with the Saudis, as far as I know, Stefanie, saying, all right, we can help you with this, right? When does that cross a line that we have to watch?
I think it was less about those conversations and more about the mechanism by which Musk alerted his shareholders and the public, which was that very short tweet last week, which, there's news today. It surprised the board. That's not great news to be coming out. If his confidants and the folks who are seniors in the company weren't prepared or didn't know that this was coming, that's probably not a good sign. I think it's less about who this was and how these conversations sort of unfolded privately, but there is a responsibility to shareholders about when and how you make announcements like this.
Stefanie, that tweet said that funding was secured. Was that a misleading statement? It doesn't sound like the funding was secured. It sounded like there was discussions between Musk and the Saudis, but that they didn't necessarily commit to anything. They hadn't submitted documentation or formal proposal. Is that what the phrase that's going to get potentially him in trouble?
Yeah, that seems concerning to me. It's hard to know what regulators will think in the end. I feel as an analyst of these tech regulatory issues, I keep witnessing these first ever experiences that we're going through as a society where the technology is progressing so rapidly. But the parsing every word, considering what every word means, is going to, these types of things are under much greater scrutiny when Elon Musk is breaking kind of boundaries by using Twitter to make an announcement like this, and that does seem concerning. If saying that you've secured something that isn't secured, that does seem very misleading.
Stefanie, by the way, we're getting word. I don't want to interrupt you there, but Stefanie is announcing. Tesla is announcing the formation of a special committee to look into this going private thing. But your thoughts on that?
That's great. I think.
Yeah, I thought you'd feel that way. I just wanted to pass it along.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's great. I think anything to bring some formality to this is going to be meaningful. I think the blog post was sort of a double-edged sword for them. On one side, the blog post yesterday, to clarify, where Musk kind of laid out in much more detail what he had hinted at last week. It was great to give more information. It also sort of makes me question, you know, did all that information need to be given initially? What will regulators think? That there was a follow-on lengthy sort of explanation for what Mr. Musk was thinking. All of that sort of, it has good and bad notes to it. But, you know, at the end of the day, Twitter is an approved medium for companies to make announcements. There is the idea that companies need to have some precedent in how they've made announcements on Twitter in the past. There's question around if Musk has blocked people from following him. Does that sort of preclude certain shareholders potentially from having access to that information? I think all those are going to be questions that SEC regulators are asking.
Well, Stefanie, we just saw the tweet. You know, it seems like Tesla is working with some high-powered, you know, bankers, Goldman, Silver Lake, advising on this deal, some lawyers as well. And this would be, if this actually occurs, it could be the largest leverage buyout of all time at $70 billion. This is a company that doesn't really generate a lot of cash flow. In the blog post yesterday, Elon Musk alluded to the fact that he is going to expect a lot of the equity players to hang around. If that is the case, the SEC is still going to have to review this company. It'll be under the watch of the SEC. Do you think equity holders will be able to, will want to, stick around and hold this stock through this process?
You know, this is an interesting company in how unconventional its leader is. And a lot of people have sort of invested in him as much as in the company. It's hard to imagine that sort of sentiment and the emotional attachment and sort of belief in what Elon Musk believes that would go away just because of the structure of whether it's publicly or privately held. So I have to think that the regulatory scrutiny is obviously one thing, but there's a lot of evangelists out there, and it's hard for me to imagine that goes away.
Stefanie, Tesla burns through cash. It's got short sellers coming after it. It's got a couple of bonds that are coming due. How serious are its cash flow problems, and is it talking about a going private deal because it just basically needs more money?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why Tesla may want to go private. One would be just to have access to much more capital to help fund all of the ideas that its senior executive has. Another would just be to kind of come out from the scrutiny of being a publicly held company, which comes with a lot of strings attached for someone who is so creative. So it does seem like there would be multiple things that would make a buyout or a transition to a privately held sort of entity very attractive for this specific company.
Now, Elon Musk, he has a 20% stake in the company as it stands now, right?
Yes.
Okay, so what would change if it's a private concern?
For him, I don't think that he seemed to change anything when it went public. It would be hard for me to imagine anything about him, his commitment to the company, or his vision for what the company means will change based off of the structure of how the capital is held.
So the other point I had, and we were discussing during the break, is many have attached maybe questionable attentions to his comments last week about Saudi funding and all the rest. Couldn't it just be, no unspoken thought? He has done this on analyst conference calls and the rest, that there's nothing sinister afoot here. Obviously not a smart thing to do, but as far as, you know, something Machiavellian or anything, I guess might be pushing it.
Agreed. Yeah, this seems... I think that one thing that investors in this company are pretty aware of, and that those of us who've been observing it from the outside are aware of, is that the intentions seem to be very, very good and pure most of the time along the way, even when the decisions made maybe leave us scratching our heads because of how unconventional or unconformist they are to how the rest of us is done.
Well put. Stefanie, thank you very, very much. Kat, I was thinking of you and young people in general. The allure of electric cars, is it still there?
I don't know. I don't really think so. I don't have a car whatsoever. I don't even know anyone with an electric car. I mean, it's a little more complicated.
But you, again, don't leave your apartment that much.
I don't leave my apartment, and when I do, I do have a driver's license, and I really, really shouldn't. I haven't driven in about 5 years.
That's scary.
Yeah.
Right. That is very, very scary. All right, in the meantime, we should alert you to some primaries in at least 4 states on Wisconsin. I think this is the 4th attempt, if you think about it, that they're going after Scott Walker, or at least deciding on who his Democratic challenger will be. I go back to 2010 when he was elected, 2011 when he was breaking up unions, 2012 the special election, 2014 his re-election. Maybe this is the charm for them. That is just one state, one vignette in the Midwest. Blake Burman live from the White House on what's at stake. Hey, Blake.
Hi there, Neil. Good morning to you. Minnesota, Vermont, Connecticut, and Wisconsin voters, if they haven't headed to the polls there already this morning, will do so today for primary day. Let me sort of tick through some of the headlines in each of those states heading into this into today's elections. In Minnesota, for example, Congressman Keith Ellison, he's on the ballot there, but to become that state's attorney general, he's been accused in the recent days of domestic violence against his ex-girlfriend, which he denies. If Christine Holquist wins her primary in Vermont, she would become the country's first transgender gubernatorial candidate from a major political party. Republicans in Connecticut are eyeing the governor's mansion there. They see a potential opening to take that seat. But what really ties back here to the White House is what you talked about in the lead-in. Wisconsin, and a tweet from the president over the weekend threw a little bit of a wrench for Scott Walker, who's up in the primary today, but likely has his eyes headed toward November. Threw a wrench for Walker and other Republicans in that state, because over the weekend, the president sent out the following tweet as it relates to Harley-Davidson, saying, quote, many Harley-Davidson owners plan to boycott the company if manufacturing moves overseas. Great. Most other companies are coming in our direction, including Harley competitors. A really bad move. U.S. will soon have a level playing field or better. Now, Harley, as you know, it is based in Milwaukee. It has threatened to move some manufacturing overseas, European production overseas, because of the president's trade policies. Here was Walker's response to the president's tweet, saying, quote, as I said yesterday, I want Harley-Davidson to prosper here in the state of Wisconsin, so of course I don't want a boycott of Harley-Davidson. And one of the best ways for that to happen is to do what the president has called for, and that is to get no tariffs as soon as possible. By the way, Neil, last night the president did go to Twitter to endorse Walker, but this Harley-Davidson issue will not be going away anytime soon, as Democrats will most certainly try to use it against Republicans in that state. Neil.
All right, Blake Burman, thank you very, very much. John, you know, you look at this back and forth and all these primaries, and it's going to sort out who's ultimately going to be on the ballot in the fall. When you talk to folks, what's the latest gauge they have on the November election, how things are looking for Republicans or Democrats, specifically governorships notwithstanding at odds tonight, but for control of the House, the Senate?
Well, I mean, the question is whether the Democrats get control of the House. And, you know, on the one hand, they're very motivated because they're very motivated to challenge the president. On the other hand, Republicans have a really strong economy behind them, and it's kind of hard to argue to kind of change the alignment of power right now when you have a 3.9% unemployment rate and growth, depending on how you measure it, around 3%.
There's a lot of passion, though. A lot of people on the left that maybe didn't get out and vote in 2016 are going to get out there in just because of what happened in 2016.
And they've used these Ohio results, right, to say, oh, look, the guy is just eking out, is barely hanging on.
I think there is a lot of passion on the Republican side, too. I think it's higher now than it has been in the past before midterms. I think with one exception, since 1994, Republican voter enthusiasm. So President Trump gets people really excited, whether it's for him or against him. It's definitely a lot of passion involved.
Yeah. Lindsey, if the House switch became Democratic, the market reaction would be?
It would still rally.
Because, again, because of the certainty. Yeah.
Interesting. So the reality of that happening wouldn't dissuade them.
Right.
But, I mean, wouldn't that lead to
impeachment?
Yeah, all
the
this
rest?
talk about impeachment and a new kind of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Well, in that case, when Clinton, the impeachment, the Starr report came out and they were going through that, the market went down. But by the time it went through the Senate, the market was back to where
That was one of the best times for the stock market in our history, late 1990s.
There are some differences here with this particular act, right? We'll see.
Yes.
All right, Stuart Varney's coming up. Why the tanking U.S. economy is concerning, Stuart Varney. I'm joking. I'm just joking. More to this.
I just need somebody to love, somebody, I need somebody, I need somebody to love, somebody, I need somebody, I need somebody, and you can have it.
Well, it is good to be Donald Trump if you want to pressure Turkey, if you want to pressure the Chinese or Canada or Mexico, that we are the strongest economy on earth, and that will be the wind at our back and get others to back down. Stuart Varney weighs in on all of that. Stuart, what do you think of that?
What are you doing, Neil? 3 hours, 6 to 9, another 2 hours, 12 to 2, and another 1 hour, 4 to 5. I'm trying to do the math, even though I know that's not required for this program, but I think that looks to me like 6 hours of broadcasting in a single day. You know, they used to call me an air hog. I think it's you, Neil. But to answer your question substantively...
Thank you, Stuart Varney. Very good having you. Answer my question. Okay.
We have very strong growth in America. We have a very strong economy. And I think that is the leverage which President Trump is using to go after our rivals on trade and foreign policy. And I think it's working. We got news this morning that China, their investments in public works, on machinery, that kind of thing, is down to its lowest level since 1999. They are slowing down. Iran is in chaos because of our threatened sanctions. Turkey in chaos. And maybe we'll get some progress on the American pasta. But all around the bloc, we have a strong economy. We are applying that pressure which we can apply to our rivals, and I think it's going to be a success. We'll see. What do you say, Neil?
I think you're nuts. I think you're risking destroying this recovery by using it as leverage to do things that you, of all people, you're one of the best educated people I know anywhere in this business. You went to Oxford, for God's sake.
No, I did not.
I can't even spell Oxford. Now, you must know the risk and the lunacy involved here. Your thoughts?
Risk and lunacy? Can you show me evidence that our economy is either falling apart
No,
or
I'm not saying that. I'm saying that you would risk hurting it. No. I'm just saying by going to fight tariffs with tariffs and more tariffs and the back and forth of the trade war and all of this, that is a very, very risky posture and could imperil this recovery.
Oh, I don't think it's that risky. I think the president is dealing from a very strong hand.
You're pro-tariff, responding in kind.
Don't put words in my mouth. I did not say that. I trust President Trump to negotiate from a position of strength and to come out with a good result. Something wrong with that?
All right. Well, so you're okay with doing something that in the past has gotten us into severe recessions, even depressions. You're okay with the sort of rolling the dice on this country that you just recently called
in 1932, but I can go back.
You were there covering Smoot-Hawley, and I congratulate you for that. But could this be another Smoot-Hawley?
No.
Okay, fine.
No. Do you think it is? No, seriously, do you think it is?
I think it could be, and I worry about it. And I think I have an obligation to keep America safe.
Yeah, Superman. Can you see any damage evident in the economy now?
It's still early.
Wait a minute.
Early.
We started down this road in February. It is now middle of August. Show me some damage.
Okay, so you ignore the farmers. You ignore, by the way, Adam Shapiro, who I think in your hour is going to get to a business that's been directly affected by this metal stuff, but you choose to ignore that.
No, I ignore it only in the sense that you're exaggerating it, and I'm not. There is minor leagues damage, minor leagues.
Okay.
And there's also some pluses coming down the
soybean farmer. Tell that to the wheat farmer. I'm in touch with the folks, Stuart.
And I'm not.
Right. I'm done. I am done. I cannot wait.
I'm an American.
How you'll justify that. You're an American.
I'm in touch with America, despite the voice.
All right, Mr. Oxford Schmatty
I didn't go to Oxford. I wouldn't be caught dead in Oxford.
Stop
I
it.
went to the plebeian London School of Economics.
Same thing. All right. Thank you very, very much, Stuart Varney. Just 9 minutes till that wisdom. In the meantime, speaking of wisdom, you see this algae problem they've got in Florida, but it's expanding a lot. Jeff Flock on more on that.
Stuart and Neil, man against man. This is man against nature. Neil, incredible pictures from Florida. Disgusting. We're not talking about red tide. We're talking about red tide and green tide here. We've got a shot from the air that gives you an incredible picture of what Florida is being enveloped by right now. Stand by. We'll have the full story.
John had to remind me how this song matches this story. These kooky kids who join me here. Anyway, Jeff Flock is in north of Fort Myers, Florida, on the spreading algae problem.
I'll tell you, Neil, I've seen some disasters in my life, but this one is different. You know, algae is not anything incredible in that it happens, but the way it's happening in Florida right now is just nothing like they've ever seen before. We've got a drone from the air that gives you this canal. We're talking about two tides here. It's a red tide and a green tide. You're looking at the green tide right now. This is algae bloom, which comes largely from runoff, agricultural runoff. And I don't know if you come back to me here, this is what this looks like. It has just exploded. Look at this. That's the water in Florida right now. Can you see that? That is incredible. In addition, what's even worse than this, as bad as this looks like, I wish I hadn't splashed that on myself. We have the red tide. That is actually out in the Gulf. This is in the fresh water. The red tide is in the salt water. That also comes roughly every year, but this year it's lasted for 10 months. Usually lasts about 2 months. Toxic stuff in the water that kills the marine life, and then the air is also polluted with stuff that if you've got any kind of respiratory problems, you've got problems too. It is decimating tourism. People who live here have to leave their houses. And just look at this, Neil. I mean, people say this is just algae bloom. A lot of people that live here say that is what it looks like, which I'm not going to say what it is, what they think it is, but it's brown and it smells terrible. If we had smell-o-vision here, people would change the channel. That's what I'm telling you.
Okay. Hopefully everyone's had breakfast.
Enjoy your breakfast.
All right. Thank you very, very much. Those are drones, apparently not mosquitoes. I was getting a little worried. Stick around. A little more to this. All right, some quick final thoughts from my colleagues. Kat?
I'm just really excited to eat some breakfast. That's pretty much it.
All right, well, there you go. John?
I just wanted to say, Maria, it was a pleasure working with you today.
All right, finally, Lindsey.
Well, I was just going to say that this retail rally, I think, is on with Home Depot and Tapestry. The numbers were really good this morning. We got some other big names coming out later the week.
All right, there you go. Now we go to Stuart Varney, who's in touch with the pulse of the American people. Stuart.
Sarcasm is a low form of wit. Good morning, Neil. And
all right, my friend.
Good morning, everyone.